All right, here we go. Am I live? I think I'm live. All right, awesome. Let's do this. All right, looks like there's a little bit of lag going on, but that's all right. So we are back for another feedback live stream, which is gonna be a lot of fun. We are going to take a listen to the pieces that were submitted, and yeah, just kind of give some feedback. So as people get on, I think we'll kind of dive right in. As you can see on the screen, I got 4 pieces submitted this time. Welcome, Ritti, Robert. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I butcher people's names all the time, so sorry about that. But welcome, everybody, welcome. Wow, we already got 3 people on here. Awesome. So you know the drill if you've been here before. Feel free to comment, leave your own suggestions, feedback, questions, anything. Let's just have an opportunity to have a conversation while we listen to some awesome music. I made the announcement yesterday on Instagram that I would be doing this stream and asking for pieces to review, and we were given 4 pieces to review. So they're each going to be interesting. They're each going to be fun. As usual, I have a notebook in front of me, or notepad in front of me. I've got my pen. I'll be taking notes while listening, and then after we listen, I'll give some feedback, some pointers on how it can be improved, what went well, etc. So this first one is from Sodaus, and the requests are, does this song sound like progressive or melodic house? Is the structure of the song boring? If so, if it's boring, what should I change? And it feels like the balance between the bass and chord synth is not well matched. I can't hear the bass sound well. While keeping the sound of the chord synth alive, how can I get it right? All right, awesome. Let's do this. Let's give it a listen. All right, awesome. All right. I like that piano opening. All right, there we go. Got something going on. All right. Got some energy coming up. There we go. Nice. All right, so let's go check out. Ooh, I want to make sure I like this. So the questions that you had. All right, so awesome. First things first. Unfortunately, I am not an EDM musician. All right, I'm much more of an orchestral kind of film composer. I use synths. I work with electronic music at times, just not this kind of genre. So my ability to give genre-specific feedback in this instance is going to be kind of limited. So apologies for that. I can't really tell you if this sounds like progressive or melodic house because I don't quite know what progressive or melodic house is. Did it sound like it made me want to dance? Definitely. Did it sound melodic? Awesome. I can tell you that. All right. So the next one you asked is the structure of the song boring? If it's boring, what should I change? So the structure isn't necessarily boring. While I'm not familiar with this specific genre, I know that similar genres, they rely a lot on repetitiveness. All right, similar with songs. Songs require a lot of repetitiveness. It's not about the ideas getting boring. It's more about how you arrange them and how you build them. And for this, there were a couple of points I noticed. So, first one is that you can kind of change the dynamics a bit. So most of your growth was fairly linear. All right, you start off small and you start building. You keep building, you keep building, you keep building until you hit a drop around the 1 minute 3 second marker. Then you keep building even more and you hit another drop around 1 minute and 18 seconds. Then after that, you dropped back down. You came back down a lot smaller, reduced the texture, reduced the dynamics. That was awesome. But then you just kept building up again. And that's cool, but after you've established a pattern in music, you might have heard the idea of balancing variety with repetition in music. And the idea is like once you establish a pattern, something that can be predicted easily, it's not a bad thing, but it kind of reduces the flow. It reduces the investment your audience has. So repetition isn't something to be avoided necessarily, it's just something to be aware of. So, for example, if the listener is used to it and they know, all right, the next section's just going to get bigger. All right, and after that, that next section's going to get even bigger. The impact isn't quite as massive than if you throw in a couple of kind of contrasting sections. So to me, the most interesting moment was around 1:51. 1 minute and 51 seconds. So around here, we're listening, and then boom, it came down. So let's go back a bit further, around 1:40. Here's which kind of sound based on the answer time. Right here. Kind of a swoosh, and then boom. We arrive in our new section, which is contrasting. It came down in energy. Adding a couple of these throughout can do wonders for creating kind of a better feel, more flow, more organic personality for your music. You can still have a linear progression. You can still have a general shape where it just keeps building, keeps building, keeps building. But throughout, you want to have a few moments where you kind of diverge. It's sort of like telling a story, all right? And a lot of my themes on this channel are about storytelling with music. It doesn't really matter what genre you're trying to do. You can always tell a story. But if you read a book and the character starts in one spot and they just go straight to their goal, all right, there's nothing that makes them swerve. They don't have to pivot. They don't have to kind of overcome anything. It just starts at point A, makes it directly to point B. It's not the most engaging story. But if the character faces different obstacles, say they're on a journey from point A to point B, but halfway there, the road is blocked. So they have to backtrack and take a back road. Or they have to cut through a town, and a town has some drama or whatever. You've got things where the story goes in an unexpected direction. Doesn't mean that they don't eventually end up where you want them to end up. It's just you have a couple curveballs thrown in there. And I'm mixing so many metaphors here, sorry. But the idea is, if you could have moments throughout the music where it's not just a constant build, and you can tell next section is going to be even bigger, next section is going to be even bigger, there are moments where you can bring it back down. And even if you want to manipulate the energy, if you want it to be a constant increase in energy, that's fantastic, go for it. But the way you create the kind of shifts throughout there is to manipulate the strategies you use for energy. So maybe your primary strategy for this one is add more layers. All right, so maybe one section, instead of adding another layer, instead of adding another voice, you actually subtract a couple layers. But the ones you have, you double in octaves. All right, so now your music is larger across different octaves, across multiple registers, instead of just being more rhythmically active. Because in music, there are basically two types of strategies for manipulating energy. You can either change the size or scope of your music, or you can change the amount of movement. So if you increase the amount of movement, increases energy. You decrease the amount of movement, you decrease energy. You increase the size or scope, you increase energy, etc., etc., etc. So you can find different ways for kind of creating variety. All right, so if you do want to keep constantly adding energy, then maybe on a section-to-section basis, just swap out the strategies. Go instead of adding more rhythm, maybe you subtract a couple layers and add a larger size. Or maybe if you just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, you just subtract a bunch of layers and then you reduce it to just 2 highly rhythmically active layers. This is how you create interest and contrast and keep it kind of growing and avoid what you were mentioning in the request about the possibility of having a boring structure. It's all about kind of manipulating things. So again, the one thing to remember is if you want to create an interesting structure, treat it like a story, you've got to have some curves. You've got to have some unexpected switches or direction changes here and there. You can still end up at your goal. You can end up at your kind of story, happy ending, whatever you're looking for. But as long as you have some interesting twists and turns in there, it's going to be so much better. Hopefully that's helpful. All right, let's see here. Got some more. Wow, got a lot of comments. All right, welcome. There we go. All right, awesome. Just people being polite and welcoming each other. I listened to a bit of this genre back in the day. It sounded really well structured to me. No boring points. Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Visa 3 to 4 years ago, I was doing dubstep. Made me remember back to the old days. Awesome. This is like one genre I haven't really explored. I should explore it. I really enjoy it. My wheelhouse is always kind of more like orchestral. It's the one where I feel most at home. V-Smade, my music sounded bad, but good memories. I like it. KOS, welcome. Pavel, welcome. Awesome. Ryan, it's all right. My first music making experience for making some genres went horrible. Yes, there's all kinds of crazy things that go on when you're kind of learning music. I can share, and some of mine are quite publicly posted on YouTube, so there's that. Pratik, welcome. Thank you. Wow, love from India. It's really cool seeing where people are from. That's awesome. My track today is a mixture of electronic and film scoring. Yes, I'm excited to get to that one. But first, let's make sure we added everything. So I already talked at length about how you can make structure and like sound more interesting. And then the last one, it sounds like the balance between the bass and chord synth is not well matched. I can't hear the bass sound well. While keeping the sound of the chord synth alive, how can I get it right? So the idea of balance is kind of tricky. It's different from genre to genre, instrument to instrument. But in general, I like to think of balance as being one of 3 primary pillars to great arrangements or great orchestration. The first one being focus, the second one being separation, and the third one being balance. All right, so these are all kind of genre neutral, meaning that these can apply to whatever type of music you're trying to portray. Focus just means that your foreground material, whatever the most important material in your music, should demand the most attention. That's fairly simple most of the time. Your melody typically has the most interesting material, so it tends to demand the most attention. Separation means that you should be able to tell the difference between the different layers. All right, so your melody should have, for example, a different rhythm than your chords. It should have a different articulation types, different kind of sound colors, etc. Lots of things you can do to create separation. Then balance basically means that once the other 2 are taken care of, each of them can be approximately equal in volume. So with the bass, I would find to help kind of create your bass a bit heavier and create some space for your chords, for your bass to be heard. Feel free to increase the volume. Just try to find a unique way of making it stand out in the mix. So whether that's panning, we've talked about panning before to create a digital space for your instrument, and whether it's making sure your bass has a more unique sound, and it could be shape too. If your bass has a very strong attack, a very plucky attack, so it has a boom kind of sound, like a strong attack quickly comes back down. Different kind of sonic shapes. I can't believe I made that noise live. I don't know. It's kind of sticking in my head right now. Just kind of ways of things. Like there are different ways you can make it stick out. 2 resources to help you learn more about this. One is my playlist on advanced orchestration techniques. All right, the very first video in that is called The 3 Pillars of Great Orchestration, and it goes into detail on how you can use each of these, focus, separation, and balance, to make sure your music has a clear sound. The second one is actually a blog post. Here, let's pull this up. So I have a blog post creating a digital space for your arrangements. And this talks about how you can, exactly what you sound, create a digital space for your instruments. This one is focused primarily on orchestration, like orchestral arrangements. But the section on panning should be particularly useful for electronic music when it comes to kind of creating unique little spaces for each instrument. And while we're at it, I would like to announce I made a new blog post today. It's about how do you portray emotions with music. This is basically the free version of my online class. I know a lot of you have been asking for more information about the class and like what the topics and material. You want me to do videos about the stuff? So this is basically my response to that. This is the free version. It breaks down the basic tenets behind portraying emotions in music. It talks about how if you can describe your emotion, you can use that description to create your music. So if sadness is dark and low energy, then to create sad music, you create dark and low energy music. So it talks about the 4 basic fundamental types of emotional music. Then to keep things simple, I just give a template for each of those 4 fundamental types. And then I have some tips on how you can modify each one to create more specific emotions. It was a lot of fun to kind of put this together. I love to write. It was a fun blog post. So check it out, give it a read, and then let me know. What do you think? Any comments, any questions about it? Would you like to see me do a video based off this blog post, etc.? Cool stuff, cool stuff. Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think we've covered everything I wanted to cover for Sodos. Sodos, I don't know if you are on here or if you'll watch later. If you have any follow-up questions or anything, feel free to shoot me an email, comment on this video, whatever you'd like. I am always up for helping you guys with your music. All right? It's really enjoyable. I enjoy doing this stuff. Wow. Active comment section today. All right, so let's see here. KOS, I've got a chord progression that I've been using to write a Ghibli style piece for college. It's D minor, A minor, B flat major, B diminished, then C major 6 or 7, and then A minor. That's awesome. I love it. It's kind of, the use of the diminished chord, the major 6th and the 7th, those work really well to kind of keep that Ghibli style music. And I know I have been roughly informed by one of my roommates that it is not pronounced Ghibli, as I have always pronounced it my entire life, but it is Ghibli. All right? And in my defense, I thought it's named after the Italian fighter plane, the Ghibli. I believed in Italian it was pronounced Ghibli, so the studio should be pronounced Ghibli. And then my friend, who speaks much more fluent Italian than I do, pointed out, no, if there's an H after the G, it's a hard G. It's pronounced Ghibli. And so, yes, I have been forced to eat crow and realize I've been pronouncing that word wrong my entire life. That being said, Ghibli just sounds wrong to me, so I'm going to pronounce it Ghibli. All right, thank you for that. But yes, K0S or KOS, however you pronounce your name, that sounds like an awesome chord progression. I think it'd be a lot of fun. I'm assuming you've checked out my videos on Studio Ghibli music. I have 2 types of videos. I have a playlist that I did more recently that has an analysis, and I'm very proud of those videos. And then there's the very first video I ever uploaded to this channel, which I have a love-hate relationship with because it's racked with a bunch of music theory errors because I made it when I was just getting started. Which is fine, but I have a love-hate relationship because that's by far the most popular video by a massive stretch on this channel. So yeah, mixed feelings about it. But yeah, awesome. So if you haven't though, check out the playlist I made. It's a fun series I put together, if I do so say myself. Visme, I've wanted to go check out Tabletop's Ghibli playlist, but I've decided to finish his Melody playlist. Awesome. Thank you. They're both fun. I enjoyed making both of them. I'm proud of both of them, and I'm glad you guys are enjoying them as well. Matt Lewis, that B flat major to B diminished C major is a classic Hisaishi. Yes, it is. That kind of stepwise motion. Here we go. Because you've got that kind of baseline movement. And Joe Hisaishi does use a lot of stepwise movement in his baseline. I really tried, KOS, yes, I really tried hard to get it right with strings and to try not have them overlap each other and sound too diminished. Awesome, yeah, arrangement can be tricky, but a lot of fun. Let's see here, thank you, it helped me a lot. Awesome! Oh, awesome, so Sodas isn't here. Wonderful, thank you, I'm glad you found it useful. Kiss, I'm pretty sure it is named after the plane, as Miyazaki loved planes like in Porco Rosso. Exactly, yes, and the plane was apparently pronounced Ghibli and not Ghibli, like I have thought all these years. So now I'm just going to go back and forth. But let's get on to the next video, shall we? So Ryan Reyes. Request. All right, so wants feedback on just the overall mix, the structure, sound quality, and just in general ways to improve. So let me cross out the things I've already written for the previous piece so I have some space to kind of focus on this one. Let's give it a listen. Very different style. No worries, Ryan. I'm enjoying it so far. Great reduction in shape like we were talking about with the last piece. Ooh, wind. Alright. I'm loving this contrast. This is awesome. awesome. There is a lot to unpack here. All right, and all great stuff. All right, so first, this is really, really well done, Ryan. All right, you should be very proud of this. Incredible sound, unique color, beautiful melody. Your structure was awesome. All right, great development. In fact, I wanted to say this piece is an excellent example of a couple of the kind of concepts that we have talked about earlier in this stream and in other streams. First and foremost, the idea of playing around with the dynamics and texture. All right, so I talked about this earlier today. Talked about it earlier before, but not enough composers, especially beginner composers, understand that the dynamics are something you should play with. All right, when you're starting large and big, contrast that with the section that comes back down. All right, because you can't constantly have a build in energy, build in energy, build in energy without any kind of contrast. It's like a story that's just booyah after booyah after booyah, celebration after celebration. Cool, but it gets boring. It's like playing a video game on God mode. It's fun for a little bit, but once you no longer have to work about getting any gold, you don't have to worry about any armor, you don't have to worry about battles. Once there's no risk, there's no longer any reward. Now, you did really well with this piece, where you had this huge build-up, awesome, massive entrance, and then, boom, right at the 1 minute marker, you came right down. So we're playing around here. Let's go to 44. It's getting big, huge, massive sound. Transition coming down, by the way. But now we have a very soft section for strings, and the contrast makes this interesting. You notice how everyone in the comments right now is saying this is amazing, they really enjoyed it, this is an awesome piece. A lot of that is because you provided contrast. You kept it interesting. If things had just kept massive for all 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and there's no contrast, then it just starts to all sound like the same thing over and over again, and it becomes less interesting to follow. So fantastic job doing that. I'm just emphasizing it because it's a great example of what I've been talking about. Then around 210, that's another thing I wanted to bring out. Another concept I've talked about on this channel before is the idea of how to make an epic moment hit. And some of the best way to reach a climactic moment or make things sound more powerful is to precede them with a much quieter section. This is very common in orchestral music too, particularly with brass instruments. Right before the huge dramatic kind of brass entrance, there will be in a section or two where the brass instruments just aren't used, or they're used quietly or sparsely. And then at the big climactic moment, they boom, all enter and create this epic feeling. So if you ever want to create kind of like a goosebumps moment in your music where you get chills, like that's awesome, that sounded epic, usually it's because you're introducing a powerful new element that had previously been missing. And this is exactly what happens around the 2 minutes and 10 second marker. We have a nice quiet section, then around 2 minutes and 10 seconds, boom, we hit with new energy. Down low. It's building. It's building. Comparatively, it's a very simple kind of entrance. You are introducing one more instrument. You have a cymbal swell and a slight increase in dynamics, but especially after an entire minute of kind of soft string textures only, you get this kind of beautiful impact of that sound. So, excellent examples, but you didn't just come here for praise. You're looking for feedback and ways to improve. So there are two things that I would do to help improve this. First, your arrangement and instrumentation sounds amazing. There are just a few ways you can make it more realistic. And this is me being picky. All right? And in particular, this has to do with your long, sustained notes. All right? So when you have horns, for example, holding a long note, or your irhu, or however it's pronounced, holding a long note, that's awesome. But in MIDI information, let's pull up Cubase. The temptation is to essentially, let's get this here. Let's delete this. This was just a sample from a lesson I taught earlier. The temptation is to basically take your note, and there you go. It's a sustained note. Problem with this is on a computer, one note with no CC data is just holding the note. All right, it's one sound, one recording. It's a stable sound. And in music, long sustained notes are rarely ever stable. All right, so let's take some notes, shall we? Say notes are never 100% stable. All right, so live musicians, to create a more expressive sound over a long sustained note, will change the sound. All right, and that's what expressive is in music, is you are manipulating three different things while holding a single note. All right, there will be, we'll say there will almost always, okay, so we'll say expressive notes will always have a change in pitch, timbre, and volume. Let's backspace because that's going to drive me crazy. So now this might seem a little interesting. You might not understand, like, all right, well, how does the sustained note change in pitch? But it does. Bear me out, all right? So with pitch, for example, you have vibrato, all right? Where the sound is being, the string, for example, string instrument will rock the string back and forth, which will create slight increases and decreases in pitch. Nothing enough to change the pitch, but it will create a bit more of an instability, a bit more expressive sound. So like singing would be like, instead of going, you go, That was an extreme example of vibrato, but like you kind of get like wavy sound to your sound. With vibrato, the general baseline, you can actually control vibrato. Vibrato will typically be CC controller 21. And you can quite simply just kind of draw your shapes in using your sound library. All right, so this is a piano, so vibrato is not going to be an issue here. If the piano doesn't use vibrato, but string libraries do. And when you're using vibrato, you can keep in mind the dynamics. All right, vibrato will typically follow the dynamic shape. As the vibrato increases in volume, the amount of vibrato will also increase. As the volume decreases, so will the amount of vibrato. All right, so that's how you can kind of manipulate the pitch to create your pitch, the more expressive pitch factor for your sound. All right, for timbre, this is typically modulation data. All right, so modulation data, basically the timbre means that, for example, with strings, again, when you're holding a long note, the amount of force placed on the string will almost never be constant. And this is by design. This is how you create a more expressive sound. And actually, let's do volume first. All right, so sustained notes almost always have a shape. Something kind of like a hill. All right, a long note will typically start softer, reach a high point of volume, and then come back down. This doesn't always need to be dramatic. You might not always be shifting through multiple dynamic levels, but say you're holding a long sustained note at mezzo forte, or kind of loud. You can start at a soft mezzo forte, then build up to a louder mezzo forte, and then find your way back down to a softer one again. You create that kind of shape. Or sometimes you start with a loud mezzo forte and you come back down. It depends on what kind of shape you want to give your music, give your structure. And then the modulation data almost always follows that shape. Because the modulation data is, well, the volume is the actual physical volume of your sample library. The modulation has more to do with mimicking the physical sound of the instrument. So when, for example, when a trumpet note is played louder, suddenly the partials of that sound become more apparent. So the sound becomes brighter. It's the same pitch, but now it's brighter, more forceful. When it's played quieter, it becomes more mellow, less sharp, a little slightly less focused. The same goes for stringed instruments. When played loudly, the string has a more piercing like sharp quality to it. It's the same pitch, just a slightly different quality, whereas playing softly will have a slightly mellower, raspier type quality. So all of these things, when you have a long sustained note, you don't want to just leave them constantly. So, for example, let's just pull up the three things. All right, we've got main volume. We'll use expression. Expression will be our volume. We've got vibrato, and we've got modulation. If we have a long sustained note like this one, we don't really want to have it look like this. All right, this is not a musical sound. It's a technical sound, but if you want to create an expressive musical sound, you want to create a general shape. So let's say for the volume, we know we're going to be around here somewhere. We're going to build a peak here, and then we're going to come back down. Very subtle, but it's going to work. Then, for the vibrato, we'll come up, and then we'll slowly come back down again. Keep a similar shape. And then again with modulation, we'll create a general similar shape as well. Now, the different instruments, the approaches you take to this are going to be slightly different. I have a live stream video on one of my playlists. I think it was like live composing lessons, where I share a process for doing all this for stringed instruments. If you are interested, though, I also have an ebook all about creating effective mock-ups that's available on my website. And that goes into detail on how you can get these expressive, realistic performances out of the strings and wind instruments. So hopefully that helps. That was point number 1, because yes, we are still giving feedback on a piece of music. I kind of forget that every once in a while. But the last one, and this one's a bit more specific to your piece, not just details, is the last section, very last section, last like seconds or so. You have a long stretch of time where the melody... You have a long stretch of time where your melody and texture don't change. All right, so by that I mean like the melody is in the same instrument. That's awesome. But the texture also doesn't change as you're coming back down. Texture, again in music, refers to the number and types of layers. So if we listen, you have a melody, you have chords, you've got kind of like an ostinato or counter melody, and a bass line. Really cool stuff. But after a while, again, you want to think about manipulating the energy, kind of what we were talking about earlier in this video. Creating small shifts. You can do that in every section, even if you're bringing it down. So maybe do something like incremental complexity, meaning that gradually you increase or decrease the complexity of your piece. As you're coming back down, maybe start moving that ostinato around a little bit less. Maybe start with rhythmic strings that slowly slow down and become less rhythmic. Maybe you could try doubling that original melody so that you've got multiple instruments playing it together, maybe strings and whatever that instrument is, and then halfway through the strings drop out. You don't need to do much. I just noticed when I was listening to it after a while, after having so much interest in the piece, at the very end, it felt a little lackluster. I think that's because just with so much development earlier, you very dramatically switched to almost no development as you were coming back down. So I think maybe just adding one kind of shift. So in that long stretch, that final section, if at least one thing changes between the start of that section and the ending button where all the instruments kind of play that last chord, if you can have one more additional shift, one way that it grows or diminishes or whatever you do, that would do a lot to make it sound even more interesting. But fantastic job, awesome work. I hope this was helpful. Let's see here. What libraries you use, Ryan? Ryan says main ones are Abbey Road, One Orchestral Foundation. For this, I also use the East Asia Library from Native Instruments. Awesome. I don't know about the vibrato CC. That's great to know. Awesome. I'm glad it helps. Obviously, would you use permission for expression for synths? Yes. It depends. If you design the synth itself, then it depends on whether you built it to actually have expression. Remember, expression is basically volume. You have 2 types of volume. Technically 3, but we'll focus on 2. You have main volume, which is the actual kind of volume of your track. The max volume, if you think of it. And then expression is what percentage of your max volume are you using. So yeah, it's very important with electronic music, again, to create an expressive quality. With synths, if you are designing the synth, you have a lot more control. You can think about different ways you want to control pitch while holding it out. For example, if you use multiple oscillators and they're spreading across a couple octaves, one way to manipulate pitch is to shift which oscillator is the loudest. Have the others fade in and out, so it sounds like your pitch is shifting across moving across different octaves as you go. Of course, there's vibrato, you can do trills, all kinds of cool things you can do. But then with volume, and then, of course, kind of timbre, changing the sound over time, which in orchestral music is usually modulation, and then changing the volume. If you can do that anytime you're holding a long note, you can add subtle, key emphasis on subtle changes to pitch, volume, and timbre. It's going to go a long way to make that sound infinitely more expressive and organic. Let's see here. Awesome. Florian, I think I should get an Instagram account so I don't miss these sessions and can submit a track. Your feedback is really helpful. Awesome. Yes, please do, Florian. Get an account. Follow me. Figure out when I'm doing this stuff. It's really cool. Speaking of Instagram, cool announcement. I'll pull this up. If you haven't seen it on Instagram or my page, I am doing my very first collaboration with Zach Heidi, who is a YouTuber I really enjoy. He's got an incredible channel, really good newsletter, and a very informative podcast. Really appreciate everything he does. And we're going to be collaborating on a video. We will be recording next week. The topic is basically a chat about storytelling in film composing. So how do you bring a character to life? How do you know which themes are most important? Stuff like that. So what we are asking for are questions, ideas you'd like to hear us talk about. We have a couple to get things started, but if there is anything you want to know specifically about the storytelling aspects of music, about film scoring, because we both cover a lot of stuff about music theory and tech stuff on our channels, and we kind of want to help bring a bit more emphasis to the storytelling aspects of it. So if you have questions like that, let me know. I would be really happy to add those to the mix. Florian, or I might book a private lesson with you. Awesome, go for it. Yes, I am still currently taking students. I've got a couple more slots I can take. They are filling up. For those of you who don't know, the first intake session of my private lessons are free. That's basically just an hour set aside for us to chat, get to know each other, and figure out what your goals are for the lessons. All right, and then once we've got that figured out, the lessons are set at your own pace. If you want to have an idea of what it's like to have a private lesson with me, check out my playlist, Live Composing Lessons. All right, that was a series of live streams I did. I think there's like 15 of them, where it was just a live stream that I treated like a private lesson. People would request a topic for me to talk about, and I would create a lesson plan to teach it. I would create notes. I would teach the thing live, and then make everything available for everybody just like I do with a private lesson. Unfortunately, I stopped getting requests for topics to discuss, so I just kind of moved on to this. But it's all right. I'm enjoying this a lot. Let's see here. What kind of modulation for passage of shorter notes? Usually, short notes, modulation doesn't get impacted as much. You use velocity to maintain that. Because velocity is essentially modulation just for the start of a note. L0AY. Can I submit? Awesome, yeah, go for it. Probably not for today, because we've only gone through half of it. It's like an hour long. But if you want to submit a piece for the future, feel free. Shoot me an email. The things I ask for is one piece of music, a link, preferably not a download file. So a link to either YouTube or SoundCloud are my preferred links. Share it with me, and then share a couple questions. What do you want feedback on? The more specific you can be, the more helpful I feel like I can be. Awesome. And Matt, awesome. Thank you. Do it, Florian. Best cash you will ever spend. Thank you, Matt. Yes, Matt was one of my students. I really enjoyed working with him. It's been really cool to see Matt's progress grow as a student and a composer. So thank you, Matt, for the support. Tamashi, can you do a video on Thomas Newman or Harry Gregson Williams? That'd be fun. It'd be really cool. Possibly. I'd need a couple pieces to review. Probably not going to do any composer profiles for a little bit. Right now I'm enjoying focusing on the emotions of music and such. But yeah, I'll add it to my list of requested videos. Florian, I think so too. I always struggle to compose a consistent track. Most individual parts sound good, but the overall track sound not so. Awesome. That is something I can definitely help with, Florian. So if you are interested in lessons, shoot me an email. And that goes for everybody. If you're interested in lessons, shoot me an email. I'd be happy to set something up. Vismay, what's the collab about? What will you guys be talking about? Oh, awesome. So yeah, I already answered that. Loe, yes, I already answered that. How to submit the track. Feel free, send me an email. And that goes for you too, Florian. If you don't want an Instagram account, I can respect that. Anyone who watches these, if you want to have your music reviewed, send me an email. Again, same instructions. Include a link and 2 or 3 things you want me to give feedback on. Let's see here. Awesome. Melodious Gaming. Heyo, Vincent here. Thank you for your feedback on my track a while back. Awesome. My pleasure, Vincent. I'm glad you found it useful. And Matt Lewis. I've learned loads from Tabletop. Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate that. It makes me happy to know that I'm useful to people, right? All right, awesome. Great. Speaking of Matt, here we go. Let's listen to Matt's piece. All right, requests. Nothing really, just anything you notice. Let's give this one a listen. I know Matt says he opened this. Oh, Matt. You forgot to give me access. Access was denied. Uh-oh. Oh, well, we'll go on to Visme for now. Matt, if you'd like me to review it, let me know. All right, give me some access. Visme, this one is another interesting one. Visme is someone who messages me a lot on Instagram, and I'm always happy to respond to people on Instagram, email, etc. Visme chats with me all the time, and this is one that he submitted 30 minutes before the lesson. Well past the deadline, but it was all right. He asked ahead of time if he could add a little longer later, and I know this one's gonna be fun because I know that this was written today, or at least largely today. So it's gonna be really cool to see what Visme was able to do in a day. Basically, found out about the video and wanted to submit one. So let's see here. Request: does it feel retro actiony like Stranger Things? You know, I've never seen Stranger Things. I know I really should, especially because I've heard they've got like D&D in it. And I love D&D. I mean, obviously, my name is the Tabletop Composer, and my logo is a D20 with eighth notes for a 20. But I am familiar with the music, so let's give it a listen. And how's the instrumentation, and how's the mixing and mastering? Let's see here. Let's give it a listen. Then we'll go back to Matt's. 3 minutes? You were able to write 3 minutes of music in a day. That's impressive. Ooh, there we go. All right. This is nice. Less than a day's work. How did you do this? Is there a reference track or something? need a minute here. All right, you did that in a day. You wrote that in a day. Do you have any idea how much that pisses me off? You wrote that in less than a day. All right, we started this. Dude, that's incredible. All right, that's amazing. Everyone so far, all of your music has been amazing. All right, that's what I love about this kind of series. Is it really kind of gets me excited to do my own music, to keep writing and I always feel invigorated to write. But this really no reference track. Just that pisses me off, man. Come on. I mean, all right. So, couple things. So this is one of the things where I don't have a lot of feedback, all right? Cuz I'm just kind of there's a lot going on in my head right now, right? So, couple things I'd say, I was taking notes, really well done. The mix sounds awesome. The arrangement is really cool. The instrument choice is iconic. I see a lot of people in the comments are saying that they definitely think it captures the vibe you're looking for. I have a lot of cool examples of the things we've talked about in not just this lesson, but like a lot of the live streams. And I've listened to your earlier pieces. It's incredible to see how quickly you are progressing, Vismay. This is astounding. One thing that I am going to say is this little thing right here. Why is your music unlisted? All right, come on. This is too good not to be shared. All right, and that goes for all of you. Why is your music not unlisted? If your music's not listed, come on. I get it. I understand. Sharing music is scary. All right, because anything creative, by definition, is embarrassing. It requires vulnerability. You have created something that did not exist before you and now exists because of you, and you're putting it out into the world. That by itself is embarrassing. It requires effort. But you gotta do it, all right? You gotta share music. And I know I'm kind of a hypocrite. I haven't shared a lot of my music, but I have shared some, all right? I've got some on my YouTube. This is a great piece. It's awesome. You should share it, all right? It's great. Unfortunately, I am too envious of the fact that this was written like that to provide any detailed feedback. So sorry about that, Vismay. I'll listen to it again if you want to reach out again in a day or two when I've had time to kind of digest what this is. Then, yeah, I'd be happy to give some more specific feedback. But for now, that was amazing. All right, good work. Make it public. All right, make it public. You've got 12 subscribers. There should be more than that. 2 tips. 1, make it public. 2, find YouTube channels that create compilations. All right, if you want your music to be out there and get some more subscribers, and you've got music that you're willing to share, find YouTube channels that do like epic Stranger Things style music, or epic fantasy music, or retro fantasy music. Find different compilations like that, because people look that up. And then ask them, let's submit the piece. Say, hey, would you add this to your library? Would you add this to your playlist? As long as, make sure that they give credit to the composers. And that's a good way to kind of get some attention out there. So awesome. But excellent work, man. You should be very proud of this. Yeah, but Tamashi, these pieces are so good, it just makes you think. It really does. It really does. But hopefully it also inspires all of you. All right? The whole point is to be excited. All right? Something I want to point out is Vismay has improved a lot very rapidly. And that should be a source of inspiration. The idea that everyone can improve. Every day you can do something to get better. So something I like to kind of advocate for is the idea of having a performance goal. All right, as I've said a couple times, I worked as a strength coach before I kind of switched to music full time. I've got a very eclectic background, trained to be a therapist, finished grad school, and then instead of going to work as a therapist, decided to work as a strength coach instead, because that's what I did before. I have a teacher, and now it's a bunch of weird stuff. But as a strength coach, the idea of training versus exercising was always constant. Exercise is done for itself. You go in there, you do it just to say you checked that off your list. Training is done with a performance-related goal in mind, meaning that there is something you need or want to do in the future, and you currently can't do it. But in order to do it, you need to train. You need to improve. So the idea being, like, I worked with a lot of powerlifters. If you want a 600-pound deadlift, but you can't do 600 pounds yet, you're on 550 pounds, you need to figure out, where do I want to be? Where am I now? What's the difference? What am I missing? How do I get there? It's the same with your music. If you want to score a film, if you want to score a video game, whatever you want to do, what is it the thing you want to be able to do? Take some time. Think about, where am I right now? What can I do? What do I need to be able to do? Make a list of all the differences. All right, maybe you need to get better at orchestration. Maybe you need to get better at harmony or melody writing or arranging or mixing or dissecting a story and figuring out the more technical aspects of film music specifically. Figure out what it is you cannot do right now, but you need to be able to do it. And then build a plan. How do you bridge that gap? If you can't arrange for orchestra, and you know that you need to arrange for orchestra, how do you get there? Make a plan. How are you going to study? What are your resources? How are you going to practice? I'm kind of getting on a soapbox here, but just kind of things like there should always be a drive to improve, to train, and get better at your craft. So yes, fantastic job, V-Smay. It's been amazing to see you kind of develop. This is awesome. Ryan, share it, V-Smay. I'm subscribing as we speak. Awesome. Yes. You know, I should subscribe to you guys. I should start subscribing to people who submit music. Awesome. Thank you for the idea, Ryan. Ryan, these pieces are good. Ryan, this is why, as you said, story is important. Take time to come up with a story. To go by it really drives pieces. Yes, incredibly so. V-Smay, yes, of course. I think it's worth it. Go for it. If you're constantly second guessing, you're never going to be able to put anything out there. There's never good enough. There's just, are you done? All right. Are you going to keep working on this? If not, it doesn't matter if it's good enough. It's finished. All right. If you want to keep working on this, then go for it. But if you have a piece and you do not envision yourself coming back to it, all right, it's a finished product, then share it. All right. There is no good enough. If there was a good enough, none of us would ever post. All right. Because that good enough would be set by a standard none of us could reach. It'd be like a Hans Zimmer kind of thing. And the only way you become a Hans Zimmer level person is by trying to be a Hans Zimmer person. And a Hans Zimmer level person posts their music. So share it. Awesome work. Let's see here. Share it, V-Smay. Awesome. Melodious. Always. Imposter syndrome hinders development. Incredibly. Yes. All right. Thanks. Awesome. You guys are so supportive. Awesome. We do. We have an awesome supportive group here, don't we? Question to the track. Does the chorus hit hard enough or is it weak? I thought it hit hard enough. I really enjoyed it. Awesome. Yeah, Tamashi kind of voicing myself as well. A little jealous, but a sweet jealousy. Welcome to Baha'i, and it definitely sounds like Stranger Things. Awesome. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. So let's see here. One more piece. Matt Lewis. Oh, one more comment. V-Smay says, there are so many things I want to learn, but I don't have infinity time. I want to do everything. Sometimes I want to just go to school and do music all day. Yep, awesome. Finish school. That is very important. There is so much I understand about music that I never would have been able to give to my music if I hadn't taken the time to study other things. So my approach to, example, emotions in music. Check out my new blog post. Never would have known any of this if I hadn't studied psych for 6 years. If I hadn't trained to be a therapist and learned about these different models for understanding and explaining and describing emotions. Never would have had that if I just stuck to music. If I stuck to music, I'd probably be stuck with the template format that almost everyone seems to focus on. But when I first started focusing on music, I was very confused. It's like, why is it that a film composer is taught to study the characters, study the worlds, and they will inform the music? But when it comes to music, it's to emotion, they're like, no, just use the template. Don't bother studying the emotion to have that inform your music, like the characters in the world. Just apply the template. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't done school. So, long story short, stay in school, finish school, get good. All right, and it will all come back to awesome. Let's see here. So, last piece. Matt, let's see if I got access to it now. Nice. Boss fight. Demo. Let's do it. Oh, my tea has gotten too old. Ooh. was awesome. All right, excellent boss music. Love the style. We had a lot of really cool kind of Asian influenced pieces today in terms of like using Asian instrumentation. Really cool things. I'm loving these instruments and these sounds. Awesome work. I also want to point out I am very proud of you, Matt, because as we mentioned earlier, Matt is one of my students. And it's been really cool to see your progress too. This is, gotta remember the first pieces you've shared and just seeing how dramatically you've improved over this time. It's awesome. I get really excited just thinking about it. So, naturally, I need to provide something useful. All right. So for this one, because I felt kind of bad that I didn't have anything productive to offer Visme, because I wasn't really paying attention for things to give constructive feedback. So again, Visme, if you want something actually constructive, shoot me a message. I'll give it a couple more listens, and I'll get past my own kind of awe at that first piece, knowing that it was written in a day. But awesome. So Matt. Let's see here. The only one that I can think of, because everything was really solid, and this is actually kind of another excellent example of using the contrast and dynamics and textures and focus in particular. Right at the beginning, having that contrast from sharp staccato strings around the 25-second marker to much slower kind of sustained strings. The layers themselves didn't change all that much. You still had basically rhythmic chords and rhythmic bass line and melody. But the style of playing them, even the strings were still playing, but their articulation type, their playing technique, creating those shifts shows that you don't need to make dramatic changes in order to create an interesting development for your music. That was an excellent example. In fact, let's listen to that again. All right, so we're going to hear, at the beginning, very similar instruments. All right, strings, rhythmic bass line, melody, rhythmic chords. All right, it's all going to be very similar. The only thing that'll shift is going to be kind of like the playing technique. Strong rhythmic strings and ostinato. A little brass licks. Here's where it is. The melody, still rhythmic strings, same rhythmic idea. But just kind of shifting dramatic in terms of like the playing technique. Just even though the instrumentation hasn't changed, it's still predominantly strings. Or we've still got the same rhythmic bass line adding energy, but changing the playing style of the foreground from a quick, rapid kind of ostinato to long, sustained melody gives it a dramatic shift in personality that works incredibly well for keeping it interesting, developing, and lush kind of sound. Remember, the idea is like anytime you add change to your music, it adds energy. So even though we've reduced the amount of movement, we've still increased the energy slightly by having such a dramatic shift. So awesome. Wanted to point that out. The next one, the biggest shift I want to do, is talking about velocity. So a lot of the rhythmic strings, let's not do 30-second notes, sounded like you wrote them like this, which is fine. This is how you write it. But again, talking about realistic performances with your MIDI computer, out of your computer, not every single note is going to be identical velocity. In fact, remember the velocity is how hard the string is initially struck. So for staccato strings, usually a down bow will be slightly harder, a little more forceful than an up bow. Because the down bow, your hand is closer to the string. An up bow, your hand is further away. So one way to do this, and if we get velocity up here to demonstrate, let's remove this so we can just see this. We'll get a closer look at our velocity. We'll say this is an up bow and every other one is a down bow, even though this is a piano library, not strings. Something you can do very simply to create more realistic is just create a little shift, and that's like level 1. All right, that's enough to create at least a noticeable change to make it sound a little more realistic. Level 2 is you would highlight all of those after you've made the shift, and then you can use a preset or just the random generator in your thing. I have presets I've set to create a little more variety. Because right now you'll see the high notes are identical in velocity. The low notes, or the off notes, are also identical. It's just straight lines. Again, humans don't play like that. All right, even if a human being plays each note right after the other, the amount of force generated is going to be slightly different. So, depending on what you want to work with, I'd say either 3 to 6% variability is what I usually work with. I have a 3% and a 6%. Sometimes I'll go a little bit in between, but let's just say 6% to make it a little more dramatic visually. Now we can see the strong notes are still, for the most part, stronger, while the others are softer. You can go through fixing this, like maybe I say this one's a bit too hard, so I bring it down, because you'd listen to it. Then, after this, again, if we want to create the next level up, we've now changed how forcefully each note is hit. We can now shift when the notes are played so that they're not identically spaced, which again, no human being can be entirely accurate. So I'm going to just shorten these ever so slightly so we don't have any overlap issues. Then when they're all highlighted, again, I will go to the, wrong folder, Logic Presets. I'm going to do some, where is it? Starting point variability. Very, very subtle. -2 to 4 ticks. All right, you're not going to notice much, but if we zoom in, we'll notice this one is now slightly off. This one is slightly early. This one is, again, slightly off. They've all been randomized within a short window. Again, it's not dramatic, but if you do this to all the different instruments that you're working with to create each one sound a little more realistic, it's going to be really cool to create a much more realistic sound. In fact, let's listen to it a little bit, shall we? Let's take this one. Let's highlight all of this, bring it over to 31, and then let's listen to the difference, shall we? Just chop it up. This is just vanilla kind of performance. Subtle, but more human, if that makes sense. So that's what I would say. Focus a little bit more on creating more realistic kind of velocity performances. The general rule, if we're creating a realistic mock-up, is that you need to make it more kind of human error, more randomness. The trick to creating a realistic mock-up, something that sounds like an actual performance, is to understand where that randomness comes in and what kind of randomness can be created. So again, if you would like to learn more about that, I have a live stream I did about creating realistic string mockups that will explain all of this. And then if you want to learn even more, again, here's my blog post. Check it out. How do you portray emotions in music? It's new today. But if you want to learn even more about the different sections, the Guide to MIDI Mockups for sale on my website, $20. Really cool ebook if I do say so myself. And while you're there, check out the other stuff I got for sale. Help support your boy. All right, this is how I stay out of the poorhouse. Portraying Emotions with Music. This is the ebook version of my online class. So it's all the notes, articles, and videos that come with the class. The only thing that's missing are the weekly lessons, like the live lections and discussions where we get face-to-face like this, and the detailed feedback. After some feedback from the initial beta test, I was asked for a bit more personal feedback. So now, this last class, people are averaging about 2 pages of written notes and feedback. Like, so 1 page front and back. Basically, written feedback on their homework, each homework assignment. So, definitely worth it if you ask me, or most of my, like all my students have said that it's worth it. So if you're interested in the class and getting that kind of feedback, you can check it out here. So your boy has made his sales pitch now. Check it out. The class is limited. All right, there's a limited amount of seats available, and since I actually teach it in person, and it's not like a lot of online classes where you just follow the modules at your own pace, it's 6 weeks long. So if you do not sign up for this one and you are interested, just know you will have to wait another 6 weeks before it reopens, and I'm available to teach again. Awesome. Just let's see here. Any tips? Awesome. People seem to really enjoy Matt's piece. Let's see. Florian, awesome feedback on the panning. That's another something that I sent. Again, a little vibe. I mentioned it earlier. But if you are interested in learning more about panning and creating a digital space, like setting the stage for your instruments, go to my blog. Check out my blog, go to creating a digital space for your arrangements. This talks about how you can use mic positioning, panning, and reverb to help create a more realistic setup for your mock-ups. To help kind of establish, all right, this is where this instrument should sound, this is where this instrument should sound. So it sounds like an actual real orchestral setup, and you don't just have every single instrument straight dead center on stage overlapping with each other competing. Awesome, cool things. Tamashi says a little feedback on the runs could be a little cool to make grow feels. Awesome, so kind of cool feedback from everybody. Let's see here. If your customers don't appreciate your music, they have no ears unless you write great music. Awesome, must be going back for Visme, definitely. Don't worry about your peers in terms of people around you. Not everybody is appreciative of music. That's just a fact, all right? I'm not really into pottery. I have a friend who loves pottery. I don't hate pottery. I'm just kind of apathetic to it. I don't really have an opinion. It's not to say a bad thing. It just doesn't interest me. Some people just aren't passionate about music. They might enjoy it, but they're not passionate about it. That's not a bad thing. It's just not their language. It's not their passion. And we can't force someone to have a passion for something they don't have. All we can do is seek to develop our own passions and improve them and share them with the people who appreciate them. So awesome, yeah, great work today, everybody. Really cool. This has been a really awesome stream. I've enjoyed it. Kind of final things, check out my blog, read the new post on about emotions and music. Let me know what you think. I'd love to do a video about it if there is interest. 2, don't forget, I'm doing a collaboration with Zach Heidi. Super excited about this. We will be doing a video about storytelling as film composers. Something that doesn't get talked enough about. Things like, how do you know which themes you need to write? How do you know where and how to use these themes? What do you figure out the sound to portray a world? Stuff like that. How do you create a character theme? How you figure out what it needs to sound like? Stuff like that. So if you have questions about the storytelling aspects of film scoring, video game scoring, etc., let me know, because we do need questions to talk about. We've got a couple to get started, but I would love to know what you guys want to learn about. But until next time, my friends, keep studying, keep working hard, and keep writing new music. All right, I really had a lot of fun. Thank you, everyone. I will see you in the next stream. All right, have a good one. See ya.